So the online session will then run till 11:15. Then we'll say goodbye to the people online, and then there will be time for those here in the room today to network and chat and ask lots more questions. So that's how today is going to run. Bit of context around the purpose of today. So I appreciate the audience I'm talking to here, but you as a sector from a defence and aerospace perspective face some really unique challenges when it comes to bringing new hires into the organisation. Extensive vetting procedures, which are obviously hugely important and must happen, but they impact every single person entering into the organisation. And the implications of those very necessary procedures can be quite painful. So declines and reneges is very definitely one of them. Big internal resource drain, responding to all the questions, to all the chasing that you have to do for individuals. And ultimately, you know, that negative brand perception could be known as that kind of ripple effect that can happen. So today we're going to focus specifically around that challenge and focus on pre-boarding. So that's that gap in time between when they're offered the job and when they start, or as some people call it, that yes to desk period. And we're going to specifically within that look at the candidate experience. This is very much about through the lens of what the candidate has to go through, and how can we strengthen that experience and actually make it a positive one rather than a negative one for the candidate. The way we plan to do that is to both share and discuss how employers in the industry are tackling that challenge. Our friends from AW and Thales are going to do lots of that sharing today, and the negative impacts, obviously, of vetting. But ultimately, how can you position yourself as an employer of choice going forward? We're going to explore this through two lenses. So one is from an early careers perspective, but also professional hiring perspective. So very much looking at both those audiences today. So you may be wondering why we at Connected Talent Technology have convened today. And it's because we've seen the impact that our technology can play in addressing this challenge for organisations in your sector, and not just in your sector, to be honest. You know, we work in lots of different sectors, and the examples of impact that we've seen is reducing declines and reneges by as much as between 30 and 70%, so real significant improvement. Reducing those internal resource pressures. So one of our clients actually measured the amount of time that they've saved. It's about 1,800 hours of time saved through the tech. And the other really interesting one was actually being able to reduce induction time. So when they actually land in the business, because of what they were able to do ahead of day one. So we've seen some really positive impact of that. We're aware there's all kinds of interventions that need to take place to address this. This isn't just tech, it's not the only answer. It's part of the answer, and we'll be exploring that today with experiences that Lindsay and Simon will share. So hopefully that's given you a bit of context to today. Before we get into the questions, I'm just going to ask our panel to introduce themselves, talk a bit about their role, and a bit about their background ahead of it. And Lindsay, I'm going to start with you. So Lindsay, tell us about you.
Okay, so I'm the Talent Learning and Culture Director for Thales in the UK. I've done quite a few roles at Thales. I've also been a strategic HR business partner, looking after some of the businesses within the portfolio that we have in the UK. And I've supported quite a lot of large transformation and change projects in my career with Thales. So I've worked there quite a long time now. I'm really lucky that I love my job. So my job is all the, what I would say, great things about HR, which is how we develop people, how we grow people, how we bring people in, how we develop the next generation. And more recently, a key piece for us in talent learning culture is our contribution to the communities in which we operate. So our social impact team are firmly embedded within talent learning culture and everything we do. We have a pay it forward, I suppose, methodology, and that is part of our brand and part of all our major programs.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's really interesting to see how social impact, we're seeing this in more and more organisations, is sitting as part of people and learning and culture, seen as a whole entity rather than something that kind of sits off at the side. So really looking forward to hearing some stuff from you today, Lindsay. Simon, another Simon. Simon, tell us about you.
Yeah, good morning, folks. Simon Perry. I'm head of HR at AWE. I promised Simon I wouldn't give a long intro about AWE, but my experience working at AWE is lots of people don't know who we are. So we're the atomic weapons establishment. We make the Trident nuclear warhead for the MOD. That's about 80% of our business. The other fifth of our business is around nuclear security. So looking at what's going on in the world around, are people doing all the right things that they should be under international law and supporting central government. My role there, I've been there 3.5 years. So I joined, and for the first 3 years, I was looking after recruitment, which is how I bumped into Connector and how we sort of began our relationship. And I'll talk a little bit about that this morning. Quite an interesting time when I joined AWE. So coming out the back of the pandemic, recruitment volume was actually pretty low. I think we did something like 400 hires in my first year there. Last year, we did 1,400 external hires. So huge growth agenda, and AWE, it had sort of the luxury over the last 10 years of not really having to recruit much. They were doing the Trident program, kept going, and now the business is going through a huge growth spurt. So we had to really step up, come out of the shadows, review everything, root and branch how we recruit into the business, including that painful piece when someone's accepted an offer and then they don't turn up. So yeah, looking forward to discussing that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. Yeah, that's very much a part of what we want to talk about. How do we avoid they make offers and either they say no, but they say yeah, and then worse still, they then renege further down the track. So thank you both. Just a bit about me for context for today. So I'm the Chief Progression Officer here at Connector Talent Technology. And what that made up job title is all about really. Is reminding me and what we exist for as a business. It's about progressing talent. How do we enable talent to progress into work and into really good quality work? So that's very much the world in which I inhabit, have done for about 30 years. I've worked in this space. And often a big focus of a lot of our work with a number of clients is really looking at underrepresented talent. What can we do to ensure that firms are not just attracting that underrepresented talent, hiring it into the organisation? I mentioned earlier, we don't just work within your sector, but we also work in lots of different sectors. So with firms like Lloyds Banking Group, Marks and Spencers, BDO, Accenture, GSK, British Airways, Atkins Realis. So a really broad range. So our insight comes from lots of different sectors, and we find that really useful to be able to share those insights into lots of sectors. So that's enough about us and me. It's all about these guys and what they're going to share today. I'm going to start with you, Simon. And I've got 2 questions to get you up and running. You touched on it a little bit, but in your intro, talking about a massive upspike in hiring over the last 18 months. What are some of the wider challenges that you faced as a result of that 400 to 1,400 number?
Yeah. I guess I sort of described it when I joined AWE 3 and a bit years ago. It was perfect storm. So we were coming out of pandemic. We had a huge recruitment drive ahead of us that we weren't used to. We're based in West Berkshire. If you ever drive past our site, it's surrounded by barbed wire. It looks really grim. There's armed guards everywhere. I know I'm talking to an audience here that is familiar with these types of sites. Public transport is a headache, and people didn't really know anything about us. AWE was definitely in the shadows, so we had to work really hard, and I had to work really hard internally to allow the business to relax, to say, do you know what, it's fine if we go to these careers fairs, it's fine if we put some slightly provocative job adverts out there, it's fine if we advertise our roles without having a list of 75 bullets of you must have done this before in your job, because those people don't exist. And I had a recruitment team that was fairly small and fairly used to what I call, it was a bit post and pray. We'd chuck a job advert out there and we'd wait to see what landed. We do really transactional recruitment with recruiters with quite heavy workload, and therefore the candidate experience was risk. And we had lots of people that when we'd hook them, that was the hard bit, we'd hook them, we'd tell them about the role, we'd get them excited about the organisation and the mission, and then it would take an age for them to join. Particularly everybody joining AWE has to be a minimum of SC cleared. A lot of our roles require developed vetting. You all know that can take an awful long time. I've stood up in many Monday day one inductions and do a quick show of hands. How long ago do people accept their offer? And more often than not for DV, it was north of 12 months. By the time somebody had gone through DV clearance, then they'd hand their notice in, serve their notice with their previous employer. Really risky period, counter offers, etc.
Yeah.
I suspect some of you have tried to counter offer some of our people. So
yeah, it's an open forum.
Open forum, yeah.
Let's be honest about how it is.
We're all friends here when we've got croissants in front of us. So we had to basically overhaul the way that we were recruiting at AWE, and that led to us looking particularly post offer. You know, when we've invested all of that time to secure someone to accept offer, how do they turn up? That yes to desk. I'm probably going to answer more of your questions in that. Do you want me to stop or keep going?
No, keep going.
So we looked at how we could support our recruitment team, who were carrying a high rec load, to manage lots of candidates and try and make their life easier and more efficient. So we explored, this is when we partnered with Connector as one of our solutions. I mean, they've not paid me to say any of this. So if you have, I haven't found the envelope yet. So we looked at how can we drip feed content to candidates post offer to keep them engaged, and that's where Connector was really helpful, because we could design bespoke journeys for candidates. But equally important for us, a benefit we found from the platform, is we could then target our outbound call effort to the people that weren't engaging. So rather than try and reach 250 candidates and you've got people permanently plugged into a telephone, and particularly in the early careers space, we find lots of our grads, they don't pick up telephone calls because that's not what their phone's for. So we were spending an inordinate amount of time on trying to get hold of people, whereas Connector helped us to go, it's these 10. If you're going to do anything, these 10 people really deserve an outbound contact. And giving them also through the platform access into people not in our recruitment team, but people in our business as mentors, to say, don't just listen to Simon Perry, don't just listen to his team. Here's someone who's doing the role a few years ahead of you. And that was really well received. We also looked at, I think one of the key things we did at point of submission of security forms. So someone's accepted offer and we go through, pre-employment checks. At the point they submit their security form, we'd send them a little welcome pack. So we used a company called Swag Pack, Swag Pack, I think they're called. Craziest name ever, but it sort of works. So as soon as we could see somebody has submitted their forms, we'd send them a little AWE box. Turns up on their doorstep, nice little postcard, nice little mug, nice little bag of sweets. And with a personalised from the team they're going to be joining, we're really excited you're going to be here. That coupled with Connector and that coupled with a recruiter having more time to make calls to the people that really mattered, had a massive impact for us. And over the last 18 months, we've more than halved our renege rate. It's still not where we need it to be. It's still just north of 20%, but we were bumping up 45, 50% renege, which was killing us. It was costing us loads of money. So those few things together has made a massive impact to our business.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Simon. I think it's that so much effort goes into hiring people and finding the right people. If you're losing nearly half on that, it's just demotivating for the team. The cost per hire doubles essentially because of what you're doing. As I mentioned earlier in that diversity piece, if you're losing key diverse groups of talent as part of that renege, that makes it even harder for the business as a whole. So yeah, thanks for sharing really honestly both those numbers and that journey that you guys have been on. Lindsay, I'm going to turn to you now. Tell us first a bit about your early careers and professional hiring, just so everyone's got a bit of context about that, and then we'll dig a bit more into the strategies that you've used.
Okay, so I suppose Talis is, we always think of it, a lot of people call it sales. So we start with the brand and the brand marketing, particularly around groups of individuals who we feel may not be as likely to apply for defence, particularly for our professional hires. So we work very closely with our networks, which are all under the brand of BU with us, to make sure that the hiring process, the selection process. So, for example, we give every candidate the questions we're going to ask them, whether it's professional hire or graduate. There is a really fantastic guide on how to apply, and if you need reasonable adjustments, very quick turnaround on questions. So we really try at the beginning to make people feel like that we're a good company to work for, and I think that helps, particularly on the professional hire. So we use Connector extensively in early careers. So we use the early talent platform. So we're very much embedded in schools and at schools events, STEM events. We have a really simple QR code now, which is displayed. Any child or parent can click on the code, they connect to the Connector early talent platform, and we use that then to let them know when our early careers roles are available. But also we use it for our digital work experience, which is quite a significant part of our social impact, and that runs 4 times a year, and we use Connector to run that. So for our early careers, we have 3 levels of Connector. They also use it for Keep Warm. We find that really, really great for young people because they don't want to speak to people like me. They want to speak to people like them. So using our graduates and our apprentices to actually engage with them, to talk to them. They've actually created some of the videos, for example, that go on Connector on answering the questions on security clearance, because for young people, a lot of the questions, they haven't got an answer, and so obviously we do manage the content, but we're always engaging our young people when they've been through that experience to help us improve Connector for the next intake, and that work is going on. So we're just about to launch our early careers. So Connector is very ingrained, I would say, in early careers. In our professional hire, I suppose we are more streamlined. So we've spent quite a lot of time on really simple things like automating our contracts. So the time from actually getting a verbal offer to receiving your contract is very quick, because what we find is that unfortunately, we can't do much about the security clearance process. So what we've really focused on is making it as quick and painless for potential candidates to join us, knowing that that actually is slightly beyond our control. We are pretty transparent, so we do put security clearance, particularly UK eyes only. We will put that on adverts, and we are putting it on early careers adverts as well. It's not all our adverts, but those where it's required we are, because one of the things that's really important to me is that we don't get young people who don't understand that a dual nationality could be an issue. They might not understand that, and despite us asking lots of upfront questions, you do get a few coming through, and there's nothing more upsetting than having to let down young people. So we've done a lot of work in making sure that the people coming through will get there, but there's always a challenge.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing there is it's about being really upfront right from the start about what's going to happen, what that experience will be. The expression I use a lot is about being positively honest. Yeah. Tell them how it's going to be, but do it in as positive way as you possibly can. I think the other interesting piece you talk about is that we talk a lot about the power of peer-to-peer. So and you've talked about it as well, Simon, is I think from my own personal experience, I still think I'm young and kind of funky. I'm really not. What we need to do is enable them to connect with people like them, ask them those questions. Here, as you said, the videos talking about that security clearance in their language, in their voice, so that kind of employee-generated content going forward. And the other piece to pick up on is that really thinking about those early stages and that brand messaging right from the start. And something just to kind of clarify for everyone, with both your connector platforms, yours is obviously AWE branded, yours is Thales brand. So again, it's about feeling like I'm being invested in and getting insight from the organisation that I'm interested up front. And in terms of for you, Lindsay, in terms of what some of the strategies, you started to touch on them a little bit, but some of the strategies that have been most effective in reducing candidate dropouts. You talked about what you do kind of up front.
Yeah.
But what are some of the other things that have really worked, both from the tech, but also more widely?
So I would say similar. Some of our businesses do give away welcome pack. Early Careers has an extensive welcome pack, as you would expect, with lots of goodies in it. I think for us, and it's a bit like Simon was talking about, it's really important that our talent acquisition team have got time to be able to talk to candidates and keep them warm, because they're the front of our organisation, and smoothing the handover from talent acquisition and in our business into HR operations, who then will manage that person through to their start date, is really, really important. And getting those two parts to work in harmony and understand they're both critical in the onboarding process has made quite a lot of difference. So they work seamlessly, and they'll work together and make decisions for a candidate perhaps who's not responding, or we're chasing some paperwork, we haven't quite got it in. They can work together to say, okay, who knows this person, who's going to make contact. So I think, again, very similar to you, that's really important. I think the other thing is, going back to the brand, we're very much focused on defence being important to the nation. So we are trying to help potential employees who are joining us, either as a professional hire, understand that we see ourselves as an integral part, and it's an opportunity to work on some amazing projects and join a big international company. So, we do benefit from the ability to be able to talk about that more widely, and I definitely think that's advantageous. One of the things that we have been, I suppose, not struggling with, but focusing on, is the number of women coming into Thales. So we have done a lot of work and I know this is about acquisition, but it's also about keeping people. So we've done a huge amount of work on all of our policies, procedures. We've integrated them into the way we work. We have really strong employee networks. So what we also do is, when people come in, and maybe, so some of our employees will join on a base clearance while they're waiting for their clearance. So having that community, knowing that they've got some support while they're waiting, is also important, rather than say, actually, this is a bit painful and I'm going to go. So we have had some challenges with people leaving under a year, and some of these things are there to address that as well. So it's not just getting them in the door. From my perspective, it's bigger than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And get the right people in the first place. They're much likely to stay longer. And again, by being upfront about what they're doing and the bigger picture they're part of will help with that. And you started to allude to a question I wanted to speak to you both about, because we know as an organisation, we hear from a lot of recent hires who talk about, during that yes to desk process, they can feel very alone and very forgotten in that time period. You've started to talk about some of the things you do. What are some of the key things you think have the most impact on them?
Yeah, I think
Lindsay say.
I think it's interesting listening to Lindsay talk about Thales or fails. I haven't heard fails. That's quite a good one. Because it sounds like you're talking about AWE, so it really resonates. I'm sure for those of you at BAE, it's similar as well. We've worked really hard on that recruiter to onboarding relationship. So we actually buddied our recruiters with the onboarding person. So for the candidate, it felt like they had Simon to talk to, and then Simon would talk to his onboarding buddy as they were going through various pre-employment checks. And you'll all know this, the very best recruiters are amazing at making that candidate feel like the most special person in the world. They put the phone down and they do it to the next person, because they're juggling human interaction. So we tried really hard to give them the space and time to be able to do that well. They're desperate to. A recruiter's best joy is to shake hands with a person on day one and go, I'm helping you build your career. And we were putting stuff in the way that made that hard for them. So that onboarding recruiter relationship is crucial. I think very similar again, just on brand. So the amount of people have said to me, AWE, you make wind farms, because they get confused with RWE, and then you go through the whole, and then, I hear our recruiters all the time saying, like, we're atomic weapons establishment, and you sort of take each word and you go atomic, people think you glow blue at night like Homer Simpson. You then say weapons and people go, how could you? And then you say establishment and they say, no one's used that word apart from my granddad in the last 30 years. So we sort of set ourselves up with a tough brand. But like what Thales have tried to do, when I joined AWE, I was amazed at how important our mission and purpose is, yet we wouldn't tell anyone about it because we were scared of being proud of defence in the market. And it really wound me up, actually, because there's now 8,000 people working at AWE, and I firmly believe that if we all do our jobs well, we keep the world safe. We make a product we never want the world to use, and we've got all of these like little strap lines that we'd say to ourselves, but we were trying to recruit thousands of people, and they'd be going, AW what do you do? And so we've had to had to work really hard internally and also back into MOD to allow them to allow us to just be a bit braver with how we position the brand, and doing that right on from job advert, but importantly all the way through that onboarding to make people really connect. And things like we were trying to, we sort of got a bit cute with how we played with that onboarding experience, because when you come to the barbed wire, there's no getting away from it. It's a bit daunting, and there's someone with an automatic rifle pointing a gun in your car, and you think, what on earth is going on? So we tell people about it, and we'd invite people to come to site before they join. Come and have a little look. We'll host you for a day. And in fact, Simon and they're going to come and see us at Old Master, and we'll give you the experience. Things like our employees all sign the Official Secrets Act on day one, and telling people about that is really cool, because you go, this is important. This is a big deal. And yeah, you're not going to be able to tell your mates down the pub on a Friday night about everything you do, but you are able to say, I'm working hard to keep the nation safe, and by extension, keeping the world safe. So I think the defence sector has got a particularly bad MO for not being proud of what we do, and we should be.
I think that's such a good point. We hear this from candidates all the time, but they just want to know, they want that authentic message that's true. And then they come, they're smart enough to make their own choice. I don't agree with it, or I do agree with it. If I do agree with it, then brilliant. And I'm going to be, and I think also if they're hearing you being proud as an organisation, they will then be proud.
Yeah.
So I think the work you've done, because I know the journey you've been on with us, I'm getting the business to allow you to be a bit more public about what you say. But I think, talk about this. There's no way you'd hide that volume from candidates, right? If you hadn't been able to do that. So I think that making an authentic connection with people, again, is really at the heart of what we're all about. Connect to Talent Tech is that authentic connection. Lindsay, from your perspective, similar question.
I think so. What I find works really well actually is within the community. So obviously our primary customer in the UK is the MOD. So we do a lot of events looking and supporting ex-service personnel that's sponsored by our fantastic network who are out there talking about what it's like to transition, what Thales is like an employer. We've been running a pilot actually where we have worked with our community to rewrite some of our job descriptions. So we've picked 10 job descriptions and we've rewritten them in the language of the military so that people coming from the military can connect with them, because like many engineering and defence companies, we have a lot of acronyms, and because we're global, you get all of the sort of international colloquialisms as well. So it can actually be quite, some of the language you use is very interesting. So we've done some work in that area, and that seems to have enabled us to reach more people. I think the other thing is we are out at a lot of female events, so we are very fortunate in that our female network is very supportive of events and talking about what it's like to work for a defence company, what they can expect, how they can develop. So again, we really use our employees in a positive way. They're able to use their volunteering hours, so every Thales employee gets 24 hours volunteering. Our early careers get 80 in their first 2 years. And it really helps people be able to support us as an organisation. And, it enables managers as well to say, yeah, that's okay, use your volunteering hours, go and help attract some great people to Thales. So it is very much around virtuous circles for us. So how do we develop relationships with our current employees to attract new employees? And I think the talent acquisition team have done a really good job in our referral scheme. So referrals we have, and our employees use that quite regularly, and that's been very well received. And obviously if you're sponsoring someone into the organisation, they're going to know about the security clearance, they're going to know what sort of employee you are, they've had a view on you, which helps keep them warm during what can be sometimes a long acquisition process to get into their desk, from offer to desk.
I think it's really interesting the point you're making there about, again, talked about this a few times, is using your existing employees as your advocates. you know, as the people, because again, it's authentic, it's real, it's not been corporately sanitized, you know, you know, and brand police haven't been all over it, you know, it's that authentic, that authentic piece going forward. So it's that authentic connection is definitely resonating as a theme. Just before we move to questions on the floor, Simon, feels like you've got something to add.
Just on that point, because you triggered a thought for me that in AWE we run a 9-day fortnight. I love boasting about this because it's a short week this week, so I've got Friday off. Whole company has every other Friday off, and we ran a campaign, and I felt like I had to sell one of my kids to get the brand pleased to agree to this. Hopefully they're not dialed in. I'll be in trouble when I get back to camp. Where we invited, and we started with the talent acquisition team, and it then just went massive across AWE, that we ran a campaign on LinkedIn called #AWE Friday Fun, where people would just post stuff they're up to on their non-working Friday. And the amount of traction that had as a campaign was phenomenal, because there was people posting all sorts of stuff. I've taken my dog to the groomers, I'm doing the school run, here's me on a boat, all sorts of weird and wonderful things, where it's just that authentic message from AWE employees saying, here's what I'm up to. And then people would click through and have a look on our jobs board as a result. So that was massive for us. And with your vets community, we've got about 250 people in our vets community in AWE, and we use them to do that translation. So if you're coming out of the army, come and tell someone who's in the army today what this AWE weird language means, and what joining that first role into Civvy Street is quite daunting for service personnel.
Yeah.
So that's really worth a big push.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. In terms of time, and I said we'd move to some questions. So Tal, I know you've been keeping an eye on questions coming from the various people who are dialing in. We've got people in the room as well who may have some questions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with a question from online, and then I'm going to go to the room, and then we're sharing the love a little bit.
It's so exciting.
So what's the first question, please?
First question: where in the journey do you most prioritise the comms/stroke engagement? Is it better to focus more on pre-offer or post-offer and communicating your mission and brand? That's quite a hard question.
So that's it's the biggest area to focus comms pre-acceptance of offer or post-acceptance of offer.
Okay.
Lindsay.
So I would say we have two different methods. So for early careers, we have an attraction, and we do lots of on-site days, because we find that parents need to feel like their young people are joining a quality organisation. But engaging the young people comes after offer. For our professional hire, it's the opposite, in that most of the communications happens, and the keeping warm pre-offer, and then speeding them through the process as quickly as possible is the route that we use for most, I would say, permanent hires. So two different for us.
Yeah, so for the different groups, it's almost weighted differently. Simon.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give you a really crap answer. It's sort of everywhere. And I think if you put all your eggs in one basket, you miss the point. And like Lindsay's described, I think that early careers audience, there's other players involved, be that parents, gatekeepers, teachers. And in fact, what we're now doing this year is we're moving our use of Connector from being just post-offer to also pre-offer, and we're rolling it into our apprentices. We've only used it in grads before. We're exploring to go to professional hires as well. So I think based on the type of hire you're doing, you just have to make sure that the story stitches together, and you can't have loads of focus pre-offer and then it will go quiet. You'll lose people. And if you only do it all post-offer, you're not going to have a bigger pipeline as you need. So rubbish answer.
No, I think it definitely comes as a theme from both of you, is you've got to look at it beyond just the pre-boarding. It's, you know, before they've applied, when they're going through the recruitment process, once they've got the offer, once they've accepted the offer, and it needs that kind of consistent, attention to those groups. Is definitely coming through as you've looked at, both of you talked about kind of root and branch review, you've talked about the extent you've looked at this, and also obviously keeping them, so it really is like that ongoing piece. Questions from the room? Yes, far away.
Some experience in terms of communication, support they get around the employment checks and first day of the so my question is, in terms of, I use quickly to welcome back, and that you know, obviously that was to be very, very successful. But in terms of your customer experience results, what is the most effective sort of highest scores in terms of, is it while they're going through pre-employment checks, is it a communication, or is it the first day? Obviously, when joining.
Yeah, really good question. Because we monitor this through surveys to our candidates, like it sounds like you do. The welcome pack's been a big boost because that was a real it felt really personal. It arrived on my doorstep just when I'm about to tell my current employer I'm going, and look how AWE are already treating me. So saw a huge boost there. But consistently throughout, it's been, can I get hold of you when I need to? Are you easy to access in terms of comms? Particularly because it takes so long. We see our scores really suffering. For some of our recruiters who've been overloaded and haven't been able to do that proactive because they've just been swamped, that's when it really suffers. So even if you've not got a huge amount to say, the fact that you've reached out every 2 weeks through a 3-month quiet period, that's where we've seen a boost in our scores. That drumbeat of regular comms, and if you can find a way to make that efficient, like something like Connector, to take some of the burden off of outbound phone calls and emails, that's where we've seen our scores.
Exactly around that point, one of the developments we've made to our software over time is actually with these digital buddies, digital mentors that candidates can connect with on the platform. It actually shows how quickly they typically respond, so it pulls the data through. So the candidate can actually see this person typically responds in a day, flipping great. This one might take a bit longer, but it's okay. I'm not in quite such a rush, so I can wait. So actually, that's one of the great things about tech, and that's one of the bits of feedback we heard. Is we want to help candidates get a sense of how quickly they can hear, because there's nothing more frustration. You send a message and it's just radio silence, so that's really disengaging. So that was definitely something we heard from a lot of clients. Tao, we're going to keep whipping through the questions because there'll be lots. Tao,
Do you consider a recruitment partner having an IPSA accreditation as being a major influencing factor in deciding to work with them across all areas of talent attraction?
wow, they want to take that.
Has that come from Phil Beer Park? Yeah, I knew he'd be. just block him. Would we consider it a major? No, I don't think we would. We'd be interested, but we're more, and Phil will know this because he and I have been speaking around options for AWE, where we were looking at how do we supplement our internal recruitment team to have more horsepower. You know, we struggled to hire recruiters. The irony won't be lost. So our approach was, let's look at accreditation, but let's look at track record. Let's speak to other people's experience. So we reached out into the defence community to see who others were using and what success that had been. That was us.
That would be the same answer for me.
Yeah.
I do have another question
So
online.
everyone in the room, go.
How do you navigate the rules stroke blockers on what you can publish, e.g. employee stories? I feel like you touched on it, but I reckon that would be really helpful for people to know how you do.
Shall I go first?
Yeah.
It's a tightrope. And do you know, it became really, I was a bit naive to this, if I'm honest. I was a little bit maverick, and AWE is not a maverick organisation. We are very safe and controlled in what we do. But where it came to life for me is I went up to MOD main building opposite Downing Street. Actually, when we were signing the Armed Forces Covenant, it amazed me. I arrived with AWE, working at the MOD. We hadn't signed the Armed Forces Covenant. Crazy. Anyway, so I was up there for a signing that we did with First Sea Lord and our CEO. And in the ground floor of MOD main building, they had, effectively, I'm not breaking any confidences here, there's like banks of TVs where they would monitor social media streams from all around the world to see what's happening. You could almost see that AWE would put something out on Twitter, or now X, and you could see how it would ping and how different news agencies around the world would pick up on our stories. And that was really eye-opening for me to think, okay, there is a responsibility that when you're working in defence, how you tell your story. So we did a whole load of communications internally, like when we did our LinkedIn campaign. We had to brief people to be sensible. You know, you cannot disclose anything that's going to compromise you or the project you're working on or your own security and safety. But we tried to treat people like adults. You know, they're all working in a very serious grown-up organisation. So we we probably meandered through carte blanche, say what you want to, oh my God, don't say anything, and then to find the sweet spot of be authentic, but be grown up and mature about what you're posting into the public domain. And we've not got that perfectly right yet. I want us to push a bit more, but it's, you know, we had a responsibility into MOD and central government around, you think what's going on in the world at the moment, there's all sorts of geopolitical tensions. You have to be careful with how you say what you say. So it's a tightrope.
Thank you, Simon. Lindsay.
I mean, I think it is a tightrope. I think for employees, we want them to be authentic. We want them to share things that are important to them, their experiences. If they're going international and they're going to a new site, they might, you know, to visit international colleagues, being able to share a photo of the outside of the building with their colleagues. So the method that we've used is we've set some quite, I would say they're important guidelines, but we also help people in that we have templates and things that they can use to generate content that they might feel safer with. So we use both routes really, and you know, it is important. You know, particularly I think, you know, defence organisation, that people want to be seen as people, and you know, because we have a lot of equipment, we do a lot of technology, and we're a big global organisation. There's something going on, particularly at the moment with so many challenges around the world. Being able to show the human side of us as an organisation is quite important to our employees. So we really try and encourage that part of it, not the part that, you know, is likely to, you know, potentially cause problems later down the line. But we have quite a lot of supportive guidelines which help people make the right decision for themselves.
Fantastic, thank you. Other questions from the room? Loads more. Yes, that is right.
So at the moment we offer a conditional contract post offer acceptance. I'd be interested to know sort of how you approach that in your organisations, and what encouragement you give to candidates around handing their notice in and at what stage. Because we find that in some areas we have firm on some conditions, and that might give them a bit more confidence to hand that notice in, particularly if they've got a really long notice period that can help. Will be equally as nervous if their offer is conditional. You know, it's a big risk if you then think, oh well, you know, I might not achieve my security clearance. Am I really going to be giving myself the best chance here? So really,
that's a great question. That's a great. You just see that through the mind of candidate, can't you? Here's my offer, but it's conditional, or is it, when do I have my notice? How do I best do that? Lindsay.
So our offers are conditional on the clearance. So we're in a similar situation to you. What I would say, it's a pretty mixed bag. So what we do find is that a lot of our professional hires may already have clearance from their previous employer. So poaching. Obviously we're a great place to work, I have to say that. But so, you know, for those individuals, it's much more straightforward. There are a small number of roles where you can come on base clearance, because although we need security clearance for everybody, there are roles where actually it's less important. So we are able, depending on the role, to onboard people, which I think gives them more confidence. But like most organisations, it just means that we can potentially have quite a long gap, and we have to manage that and be responsive, and keep in touch with them. And what we don't do is actively encourage them. Mainly because we have had the odd incident where it hasn't worked out, and I think, you know, we are an organisation that cares about its people, and we feel very uncomfortable where that happens. So a lot of our challenges around our line managers and being really clear with them how long they're likely to wait and how early they need to raise those positions, which has been a challenge previously. They'll leave it to the last minute and think they're going to get someone, and you don't know, you're talking 3-6 months. So getting that routine of opening them in a more timely way so they can afford to wait that bit longer has also helped.
Yeah. So from your perspective,
and really similar response to Lindsay's, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because, you know, we're also subject to clearance. You know, like everybody works at AWE, you have to maintain that clearance. If you can't hold that clearance, then your contract is null and void. And it does happen where someone will hand their notice in at their choice. So we never advise people to resign before, but we invested quite a lot of training with our recruiters to how do you describe the situation, because it's very personal and everybody knows their own background, their own circumstances, their own cupboards full of skeletons. So we talk to them about it and we go, well, this is what the clearance process looks like. This is what they're going to be looking for. We encourage you to wait for your clearance before you resign. But clearly, if you want to get out of your current, that's your choice. We'd never advise somebody to do it. And like you, we then have to explain to the hiring manager community, I know you want them tomorrow, but you have to be patient for the right person. So it's really awkward. But you have to, because when it goes wrong and you've told somebody, yeah, you'll resign, you'll be fine, you're in a whole load of hot water.
That feels like it could be really painful.
Yeah,
really
we've
painful.
all been there.
And that's right. Yeah, it's a bit excitable, Kat. Yeah. Yes, sir. Question.
So this is from the early careers lens and related to Renee's through the onboarding process, but actually going back to the interview stage. Do you see a correlation between if a candidate has gone through a virtual interview and dropping out in the process versus someone who has maybe come on site and had that face-to-face experience? I don't know if you do either, but have you seen anything that suggests that one would take people better than the other?
Oh, that's a really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting. I don't know if you've got any data on that or experience of that.
So not really, because all of our early careers are done virtually.
Right.
So we bring people in post offer for a bit of a taster day.
Okay.
They can come in before they've applied for a come have a little look around
Okay.
type day. But all of our interviews and assessment centres are done online. In our experienced hire, if there is a read across, because they are different communities, obviously, we do for certain roles really encourage people to come for a face-to-face interview because we want them to experience the facility they're going to be working in. We found that really powerful because quite quickly people realise if AWE is for them or not. And actually, when we have brought them on site and shown them facility, that can add to the excitement. So while I haven't got the stats, I'm pretty sure that those people that have come and had a look and they've made a personal connection are far more likely to stick with us through that process.
Lindsay, what about you guys?
So we used to do all face-to-face. We now do all digital. So I think there's a number of things that help secure that young person. So the first is that early intervention. So we work with 15 partner schools on our 5 locations. We are in those schools. We do teachers' work experience. We do STEM activities. They can come onto site. They will be invited to the open days for all our open events for our early careers programs, which I think helps so they know us. And I think that helps anchor them in right at the beginning. They all go through a digital potential assessment, which is online. And from that, they're then selected to come to a assessment centre. At that assessment centre, they do get to meet Talis employees. And again, I think that anchors them in. So making sure that we've got a strong mix of people who are doing those assessments from the areas or the sites that they are going to be based in, again, is another option. And then we have them back in at some point. But really, how we retain them is through the Connect platform, because we are pushing a lot of content out, that we have a lot of mentors. So all of those things. But now we're beginning to see people who we might do a STEM event in one of our 15 schools. They will come to a insight. They'll do our work experience on Connector. So they've been on the Talent Connector. They then do their work experience on a different version, but it's Connector, and then they're kept warm on Connector. So all the way through, they're getting that nice cocoon of, oh, I know this technology, I know how it works. It's very similar. It has buddies and questions. They may be different depending on the instances. So that helps us sort of develop our brand and keep people in our Renee offer. We still get them very often right at the last minute, to like the weekend before they're due to start. But it's really important, I think, that they have that cocoon and they recognise it. But it's all of those small touch points that we find makes the difference.
So on that, I knew one thing about that. Sorry, Claire. How often do you do those touch points? Because obviously there's a fine line between bombardment, there's a fine line between there's too little and, you know, do you tend to have like a set period of time that you do each piece of content?
So on the connector platform, keeping them warm, yes, there is. So on the connector platform, we agree what the profile of content is coming out, and that's tied because sometimes they'll have an offer in February and they don't join till September. So there's a rolling set of content that comes out. The mentors are on all of the time, but it is not all at once. It's a slow, drip fed to maintain, and very often where they are in the process. So if they're getting to the security clearance bit, they'll be able to look at the video that our apprentices done on. Don't worry about that question. It's a no, you know.
And the other obvious thing to say is then the other thing that happens obviously at the end of each campaign is then engaging with those individuals who've been through the process. Did that feel like enough? Was it enough? The regularity of the content. One of the great things, they can come back to it, obviously, and look at it, so they can access it when it's convenient to them, but it drops at a set time, but they can still access it whenever they choose to. So again, if they're head down in something, you know, they're not going to miss out on it. But it'll be there. But at the point of new stuff comes all the time, so it keeps them engaging. And then obviously the data gives you that insight. I'm really conscious of time, and the people online. There's more questions for not everybody, but the people online, if you need to jump off, of course, absolutely fine. If you want to stay on, that's absolutely fine, because there's definitely loads more questions that we've got. But if you have to drop off, thank you. But if you can stay on, you're more than welcome. And we have another question from the room.
It's a communication perspective. So Sam, you was talking about the fact that I've got a good relationship between the recruiter and the onboarder. Does your recruiter maintain all that communication throughout, and then the onboarder does all the kind of like paperwork, admin? It's just interesting to understand, like, you think that works better, what would you do? We kind of work together on that. So in my previous experience, I've done the whole kind of thing. So from start to finish, that's my candidate. It goes right the way through. But at the moment, on the career specifically, you kind of collaborate with obviously the recruitment team. So they'll do obviously all the offer and all the interviews, and then as soon as they're ready to go through their security and do all the contracting and everything, we hand them to the onboarding team. And obviously there's always a bit of a who's calling the candidate, recruiters call them, then the onboarders calling them. So I just think, like, you know, is there a better way that we could potentially do that from your experience? We tried it other ways, or
so we sort of flip-flop between both, and this baton pass of a candidate between various people, and where we found ultimately, while we were really clear of who's holding the baton, the candidate didn't know. So they wanted a person, a email address, a phone number. So we very deliberately put the recruiter in the steering wheel right from the outset, but they position that as, I am your main point of contact. You will hear from some of my colleagues, my teammates at various points, but if anything you're stuck with, you come back to me. And the recruiter has then the decision making with their colleagues to go, dear onboarding buddy, can you now please, could you put a phone call into? So they're holding that journey. And we found that worked for us. If interestingly, some of the recruiters who hold in high caseload found really high. I've done my bit. And others were like, you know, no, here. So but we sort of flipped our operation of the process by saying, what does the candidate want? And they really clearly said to us, just so I remember one name and one email address and one phone number, who do I contact? I know they might pass me on to Bob or Sally or Jane, but
I think it's a really important point. We hear this a lot about consistency of experience. Because the last thing you want is other candidates turning up to take early careers. They all turn up in September, right? And they all start sharing their experience. And they're kind of, well, I got this, and I got this. And they go, so you suddenly create these first and second class citizens. And how come I didn't get that? So that it's a really important point of how do you deliver that consistent experience. What about from a Talis point of view?
So for early careers, it's all led from the early careers team. The only part that goes to HR shared services is the creating of the contract, but the point of contact is always early careers, and they look after the whole process right the way through to induction. They come and do, because we are organising flights and things, we bring them all together in their first week for 3 days, which is brilliant, but it's quite logistically tough. So, you know, each of the sites will have early careers teams as well, and some of our business lab academies, so they also look after them. But the central early careers team is the point of all knowledge, support and help until they're deployed after induction into the various businesses that they're joining.
Brilliant.
I've got a slight. Oh.
Simon.
Well,
and then
it
we'll go
links,
to our
it
friends
links
online.
back to the earlier question around how do we measure
Yeah.
candidate experience. So what we do is 6 weeks post start date, every new employee gets a survey which asks them to rate the experience with their recruiter. There's a drop down of names with a very deliberately can't remember my recruiter's name. And so we do get many where, I can't remember who it was. And then we can sort of backtrack and look at the candidate, but we share that openly with our team, not as a scoreboard of who's the best, but how they can support each other. So if Jane's got the very best candidate experience scores, we get Jane to do a session. How are you doing what you're doing? And so we very deliberately, we don't manage performance of recruiters if they're down the bottom, but we talk about it so the whole team can come up. So we publicly, outside of recruitment, we say the overall candidate experience score is this, but internally, just for the recruiters, they can see how they're all getting on. That's been quite powerful to drive that. How do I give the best experience possible?
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. More questions come online.
Do
Sam.
you do anything to allow offered candidates to connect with each other whilst waiting to start? I know both of you have forums and events where people connect with each other on the platform.
Yeah.
But I also know you do in-person events too. Just thought I'd give that.
Yes, we do. So particularly in that early careers space, and particularly for graduates who are probably relocating to come and work with us, we try and buddy them up so they can work out if they want to share digs and accommodation, etc. So some of that's through platforms, some of it's through in-person events, and then through the teams that they're joining, they've set up things like a group WhatsApp group, so that they can all bounce stuff off of each other, and that's worked quite neatly as well. So in person, via WhatsApp, via connector.
Lindsay?
Yeah, we're the same in our local sites. Everybody's, I suppose, brought in through the central team, but the local teams have insight days. They bring parents in as well. Some of the sites for the new joiners, they always come in before they actually start. So there's a lot of both going on, both of those things going on.
Brilliant. Any more questions online, Tyler? I'm going to wrap. No, okay, I'm not going to wrap up. Yeah.
Great discussions around some of the challenges for onboarding. One being ex-military having their clearances nulled once leaving the military. Do you as industry leaders have any initiatives being drawn up to take to the UK government to consider changes in policy to allow more ability in holding clearance for accessibility to roles after service?
So who's going up to Labour conference tomorrow to go and talk to government about this? Lindsay?
I'm not, but maybe we should, because we're about to sign our covenant. Again, obviously we hold the covenant, and we'll have a number of people coming to that. And I think that's a really good question. And maybe something that we could bring. We're having a round table as part of that signing of the covenant with some of our veterans and cadet force leaders and military colleagues. So maybe I will ask that question.
Brilliant. Simon?
Not personal direct access to central government or the Labour conference, but I was in front of our board earlier on in the year giving a recruitment update because it's such a high topic for AWE. And one of the questions from our non-exec director who sits in UKGI was, what can we do to help? And my only response was, go talk to UKSB, make this easier for us, make it quicker, make it more visible what's going on, and particularly transfer for people who already hold clearance. I can't understand why it takes almost as long as a new clearance request. It's absolute nonsense. So to give UKSV their dues, and we do talk to them a lot, they have got better. This year has been better than it was last year, but it still could be quicker. And I think particularly for service leavers, it must be so frustrating when I've already got this clearance, why can't I start next Monday? And we have to wait for that transfer.
We find that transfers taking longer than clearances.
Yeah.
I don't know where we're sitting in the final to-do list, but probably not in the priority list.
And that's so true of candidates generally, isn't it? Anytime they're asked to repeat something they've already done, whether it's that, whether it's information, that just drives them nuts and just impacts their brand. Or it's a really painful topic.
Yeah.
I am now going to formally to wrap up. So I've just, as we're coming to the end of this conversation, been just putting together some themes of what I heard today. So first thing, we promised today we obviously focused on pre-boarding and that candidate experience. We promised it wouldn't just be about great tech, but to look at that whole candidate journey. And it feels like we've done that today, both from an early careers and a professional hires perspective. So I hope you all feel that. That's definitely the sense I've got from today. Some of the themes that have come through, and this is my language, so forgive me, but that power of peer-to-peer and showing the human side has definitely come through as a strong theme today. That the need to kind of engage throughout the process, not just at offer stage. So ahead of them applying, even how can we engage with them and support them? And you know, Lindsay, you've talked about actually setting them up for success ahead of the recruitment process. So that's definitely come through. Find ways to ensure that speed of response. So when candidates are looking to get in touch with the business, how can we maximize that speed of response, or at the very least manage the expectations of that speed of response? Be proud of your sector, you know, and what you exist to do, but be responsible as to how you do it. It's definitely come through. So my being positively honest, I think holds true from what I've heard today. Track those engagement levels to really think about where you're going to put your limited resource. So how can you track those engagement levels so you're putting that resource in the most effective way. So loads of really good themes. So thank you for everyone who's taken part. For people online, questions you put through today, thank you. For the people in the room, thank you. There are still questions I can see, so sorry online, but they're still there. But most of all, a massive thank you to Simon from AWE and Lindsay from Talis for being honest and positively honest, but being really honest about your experience and sharing so much really useful insight. So thank you very much to you both. Thank you.